The moment the Georgetown University Law Center auditorium went silent, something in the air changed, and you could almost feel your own heartbeat rise, because it was the kind of silence that makes people sense history is about to happen right in front of them, and on that stage sat Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, small in body but powerful in presence, her frame fragile but her eyes bright and sharp like a light cutting clean through the room, and standing at the podium was Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, her voice steady, firm, and filled with a kind of bold energy that moved like a spark, and she looked straight at the legendary justice and said words nobody in that audience ever expected to hear spoken aloud in such a direct and fearless way, because she said, "Justice Ginsburg, your slow and cautious approach to women's rights has failed us," and when she said that sentence, a wave ran across the room like a soft shock because even people who supported Crockett's views did not expect this kind of confrontation in public, in front of professors, lawmakers, judges, and hundreds of law students who had spent years studying RBG's work with respect and admiration, and yet Crockett did not stop, because she lifted her chin a little higher and said that while Ginsburg worked carefully within the system, women kept suffering, and she said that RBG's famous friendship with Justice Antonin Scalia was part of what was wrong with the political world, because she believed compromise with those who attack basic rights is not justice at all. And when she said that, professors shifted in their seats, students looked at one another with wide eyes, and older judges stared forward with looks that mixed shock, confusion, and disbelief, because nobody, and truly nobody, expected someone to challenge Ruth Bader Ginsburg face-to-face in such a direct and pointed way, and through all of this, Justice Ginsburg sat still, with her hands resting calmly and her glasses reflecting the lights. But those who had followed her for years noticed something small and subtle, a slight tightening of her jaw, a tiny signal that she was angry even if she chose not to show it openly, and the entire auditorium felt that shift, almost like the temperature changed, because everyone could sense something was building between these two powerful women, and Crockett pressed on without hesitation, saying that slow steps were no longer enough in today's divided country, and she said that courtesy and compromise had only strengthened conservatives while rights were stripped away, and she held up a paper with a list of Scalia's votes against women, against LGBTQ Americans, and against voting rights, saying these decisions hurt real people every single day, and she argued that treating such votes as simple disagreements made oppression feel normal, and the moderator tried to interrupt her, tried to bring the conversation back to legal strategy and academic tone, but Crockett refused to stop and said, "This is the substance," and she pushed the point even further by criticizing RBG for refusing to retire during the Obama years, claiming that choice endangered everything she fought for, and the room reacted again with discomfort and tension because even those who sometimes questioned RBG's decisions felt this attack was harsh. And it only grew more tense when Crockett made her first and biggest mistake by saying that RBG wrote the decision that gutted the Voting Rights Act in Shelby County v. Holder, and instantly murmurs filled the room because everyone knew RBG wrote the dissent, not the majority opinion, and someone called out, "That was the dissent," and Crockett froze for just a second before continuing, but the audience had already heard the mistake, and the room felt even tighter, like a balloon stretched too far and close to bursting, and after Crockett delivered her final line, the moderator turned to Justice Ginsburg and asked her if she wanted to respond, and the room expected something gentle, something polite, something that would smooth the moment without adding more tension, but instead, the 87-year-old justice leaned toward the microphone and said softly, "I would be glad to respond," and that one quiet sentence made the whole crowd lean forward because her voice may have been soft, but it carried the weight of decades of battles she fought in the courts and across the country, and she began with a calm tone, explaining that what they had here was not disrespect, but a deep disagreement about how change happens inside a constitutional system, and she opened a folder nobody noticed she had brought, and with careful words she reminded the room that when she started fighting discrimination, the law was against women in almost every way possible, because women could be fired for being pregnant, denied credit cards, rejected from universities, and in many states marital rape was not even considered a crime, and she said she did not choose slow steps out of fear but out of strategy, because she understood that legal change is built case by case, precedent by precedent, and she listed names like Sally Reed, Sharon Frontiero, and Stephen Wise Enfeld, real people harmed by discriminatory laws, and she explained that she persuaded all male courts not by attacking them but by showing them how discrimination hurt families, daughters, wives, and even men, and she told Crockett that this was not weakness but skill, and she addressed the friendship with Scalia by saying that their respectful dialogues influenced the language he used in opinions, shaping rulings in ways that protected women for generations, and she explained that dissents are not powerless but blueprints for the future, voices speaking to generations not yet born, and she reminded everyone that her famous umbrella line in Shelby County is used in courtrooms all over the nation today, and she said activists and lawyers need each other, that change happens from both inside and outside the system, and that her careful approach was not timid but intentional, shaped by decades of hard-earned understanding about how institutions evolve, and she finished by saying, in a calm firm tone, that civility is not surrender and that true wisdom is knowing when to confront and when to persuade, when to speak with fire and when to speak with quiet precision that makes your opponent truly listen. And when she finished, the room sat completely still, because nobody expected such a masterful response delivered with such strength, clarity, and dignity, and the moderator asked Crockett if she wanted to reply, and Crockett, shaken in a way the audience could see, simply said she appreciated the justice's perspective and that there was much to reflect on, and she returned to her seat as the whole room realized they had witnessed something rare, something powerful, something unforgettable, and as the energy settled in the hall, everyone knew this moment would grow far beyond the walls of Georgetown, and the story of this confrontation was only beginning, and what came next would pull the entire nation into the conversation in ways nobody in that auditorium expected, which is why you need to stay with me because what happened after this moment will leave you even more shocked than everything you just heard. Because the story did not end in that silent auditorium, it only began there, and as the crowd slowly rose from their seats, whispers moved like wind through the room, whispers of disbelief, admiration, anger, confusion, and awe, and people hurried out into the hallway clutching their phones, calling friends, texting classmates, and rushing to upload clips before the moment slipped away, and by the time the sun set that same evening, the confrontation had already exploded online, spreading across Twitter, Facebook, MSNBC panels, conservative talk shows, and every corner of the internet where political arguments lived, and people across the United States watched the clip of Justice Ginsburg dismantling Crockett's critique with calm precision, and reactions appeared faster than anyone could keep up with, because some praised RBG for her grace, her patience, and her strategic mind, while others said Crockett had raised questions that needed to be discussed, and a few even said both women were right in their own ways, because movements need many types of voices. And while the online world exploded with debates, Jasmine Crockett sat alone in her hotel room that night staring at her own face on the screen, clips playing again and again as she replayed her words, her tone, her mistake about the Shelby County case, and she felt a mix of embarrassment, frustration, pride, and something she did not expect, which was a deep sense of being humbled by the justice's response, and she closed her laptop quietly even as notifications kept flashing from friends, supporters, critics, and reporters begging for interviews, but she didn't answer any of them, because she felt heavy inside, the kind of heaviness that comes when you realize you stepped into a moment much bigger than yourself, while at the same time, miles away in her home filled with stacks of books and handwritten notes, Justice Ginsburg was sitting in her study with a cup of tea, reading comments on the symposium while her cat rested beside her, and she wasn't angry, not at all, she was thoughtful, her mind calm as she reread Crockett's words, because she understood something most people didn't, something she had learned through decades of struggle, that every generation carries its own kind of fire, and sometimes that fire burns too fast, sometimes it needs direction, and sometimes it lights the path in places older generations didn't see, and she respected that, even if she disagreed with the delivery, and as she leaned back in her chair, she thought about her own mentors, her own battles, her own moments of being criticized by those younger than her. And she smiled slightly because history always repeated itself in new clothes, and meanwhile, news stations across the country were already scheduling segments about the moment, inviting legal scholars, political experts, activists, and historians, all asking the same question, was this a clash of disrespect, or a necessary tension between generations fighting for the same goal? And clips of the moment were replayed over and over on loop, with headlines saying things like Crockett challenges RBG, a generational divide, and feminism's big debate, while reporters stood on the steps of Georgetown Law repeating the same story for viewers at home who had not yet heard it, and the next morning, the story reached something bigger. Because high schools and universities started discussing it in classrooms, law professors assigned it as a case study, activists used it in workshops about strategy, and even groups who normally disagreed with one another found themselves sitting together just to talk about what it all meant, and young women from all backgrounds began posting videos saying that the moment made them think about what it means to fight for equality, some saying they admired RBG's calm strength and others saying Crockett's fire was needed. And the country was talking about justice and strategy in a way it hadn't in years. And the weight of all that attention finally pushed Crockett to release a statement on social media, a short one at first, saying she respected Justice Ginsburg deeply and that she understood the reactions the moment sparked. But people didn't stop wanting more from her, which is why 3 days later she published a longer essay in a major national magazine, where she wrote honestly about what the moment taught her, admitting she had spoken with passion but not enough precision, especially about the Shelby County case, and she explained that while she still believed urgency was necessary, she also recognized the strength of deliberate strategy, and her essay went viral again for a very different reason, because people could see her growth, her reflection, her willingness to learn, and while this was happening, legal advocates gathered in Washington for an event planned months earlier. But now that event turned into a full discussion about Crockett and Ginsburg, and one young public defender stood up and said words that would later be quoted everywhere. We need both the fire and the foundation. We need the Crockett energy and the Ginsburg method. We need people who push the system and people who work inside it. That's how real progress happens, and those words captured something important, something the nation could feel but had not yet said out loud. Because the truth was that the argument between these two women had opened a door the whole country needed to walk through, and while public reaction grew louder and deeper, something else was happening quietly far from the cameras, because Crockett found herself thinking again and again about the justice's calm face and her measured words, and Ginsburg found herself thinking about the congresswoman's passion and pain, and neither woman realized that this moment would not divide them, but ultimately shape the next stage of both of their legacies. Because the real turning point had not arrived yet, and when it did arrive, it would begin with a single unexpected message delivered from one office to another, a message that would surprise both women, and would pull them into a new chapter that neither audience members nor reporters nor even the women themselves saw coming, and the way this message changed everything will leave you even more stunned than what you've already heard, so stay with me because what happens next will shift the entire story in a way nobody in that Georgetown auditorium could have imagined. And the way this message changed everything will leave you even more stunned than what you've already heard, because when that message arrived, it did not come through a press release or a public announcement, but through a quiet email from Justice Ginsburg's chambers to Congresswoman Crockett's office, a short, calm invitation asking Crockett to meet privately, not on camera, not in front of reporters, not at a hearing, but in Ginsburg's office at the Supreme Court, and Crockett stared at that message for a long moment because she never expected the justice to reach out to her with grace instead of anger, and she felt a nervous weight in her chest as she typed back a simple yes, and 2 days later she walked up the marble steps of the Supreme Court feeling a mixture of respect, regret, and determination, and when she entered Ginsburg's office, she found the justice seated at her desk wearing her signature collar and glasses, the light from the tall windows falling over her like a calm spotlight, and Ginsburg greeted her gently, saying her name with a soft warmth that made Crockett feel something she didn't expect, a strange mixture of comfort and responsibility, and the justice motioned for her to sit, and after a moment of quiet, RBG said, "I wanted to speak where tone is clearer than a viral clip," and those simple words opened the door to a long private conversation, a conversation that would transform both women in ways the public never saw, because Ginsburg did not scold her or shame her. She simply explained the weight of each decision she made over the decades, the cases she fought, the risks she took, the pressure she felt, and Crockett listened with the kind of attention people save for life-changing moments, and then Ginsburg asked Crockett to explain her perspective, not as a critic but as a colleague, and Crockett spoke about the community she came from, the urgency she felt every day when she looked into the faces of women asking why change was still so slow, the pain of watching rights crumble faster than policies could be built to protect them, and she spoke about her frustration, her fear, and her determination, and Ginsburg nodded with deep understanding, and at one moment she took Crockett's hand and said softly, "Your fire is needed. But precision keeps the fire from burning down the very home you are trying to save," and Crockett felt something shift inside her because the justice wasn't trying to silence her, she was trying to guide her, and that moment created a bridge neither of them expected, a bridge built on respect, humility, and truth. And when Crockett left the office that afternoon, she walked down the marble hallway feeling different, calmer, clearer, and she knew she had just learned something she would carry for the rest of her life. While on the other side of the building, Ginsburg watched her leave with a soft smile that held gratitude for the next generation stepping forward, and weeks later, something extraordinary happened when Ginsburg invited Crockett to join a bipartisan panel on voting rights. And the entire legal world shook because no one expected the two women who had sparked such a dramatic national debate to stand side by side on the same stage, and when they walked onto that panel together, the room filled with reporters and cameras ready to capture another clash, but instead, they witnessed something far more powerful, because Ginsburg introduced Crockett not as a critic but as a leader with passion and courage, and Crockett spoke about RBG's legacy not with tension but with deep respect. And together they explained that social change needs both methods, the pressure and the patience, the fire and the foundation, and this moment left people speechless because it was not about winning or losing, it was about learning and growing and blending the strengths of two very different eras of fighting for justice, and in the months that followed, their unexpected partnership inspired law students, activists, and organizations across the country, and after Ginsburg later announced her retirement due to health reasons, she referenced Crockett during her final public remarks, saying every generation must shape justice in its own way and that she believed the next generation was ready, and Crockett, standing quietly in the crowd, felt tears behind her eyes because she knew those words were for her too, and years later when she introduced a major voting rights bill on the House floor, she quoted Ginsburg directly, using the famous umbrella line the justice had defended so passionately, and when that bill passed with bipartisan support, Crockett looked up for a moment as if the justice were still guiding her, and the country finally understood that the clash at Georgetown had never been a rupture, but the spark that started a much deeper conversation, a conversation about strategy, generational change, and the many shapes justice takes, and the legacy of their exchange lived on in classrooms, in legal scholarship, and in the hearts of young lawyers who learned that change is never carried by one path alone, but by many people walking differently toward the same destination. And the most powerful truth of all is that their story proves fire and wisdom are not enemies, they are partners, and sometimes the loudest breakthroughs come from the quiet moments that follow the storm, which is why the real meaning of their confrontation continues to grow even now, touching people who were not even alive when it happened, calling them to think, to challenge, to learn, and to rise. And if you listen closely, you can still feel the echo of that moment in the Georgetown auditorium, the echo that reminds us that justice evolves, justice adapts. And justice always needs both courage and clarity, and what happens next in this journey of progress is now in the hands of the people watching, learning, and stepping toward the future with the same determination that brought these two women together, and that is why this story does not truly end here, because its lessons keep unfolding. And what you will see next in this movement will surprise you even more than everything you just read. Thank you for staying with this story until the very end. I hope you felt the power behind every moment, from the silence in the Georgetown auditorium to the quiet strength that grew later between two women from two different generations. This story reminds us that justice is never simple. It takes courage. It takes patience. It takes fire. It takes wisdom. And it takes people who are brave enough to disagree, learn, and still keep moving forward. That is how real change happens in our world. That is how progress survives across time. And that is how stories like this one keep teaching us long after the moment has passed. If this story touched you, inspired you, or made you think in a new way, I would truly appreciate your support. Your support helps this channel grow. Your support helps these stories reach more people. And your support encourages me to bring you more powerful, meaningful stories just like this one. Please take a moment to like this video if you enjoyed it. Please subscribe to the channel so you never miss a new story. And please hit the notification bell, so every new upload reaches you right away. Also, tell me in the comments where you are watching from. I love seeing the beautiful mix of people from across the country and around the world who join these stories every day. Thank you again for being here. Thank you for listening. And thank you for supporting this channel. More stories are coming soon, stories filled with truth, emotion, and unforgettable moments. Stay safe, stay strong, and I'll see you in the next story.